When I walked into the house I had shared with Jake, it felt like I was stepping into a stranger space. Everything felt wrong. It wasn't just the exhaustion from a night of bad decisions or the overwhelming guilt weighing on me. It was something deeper, something irreversible. I couldn't shake the sense that my life had shifted permanently. The house once, a place of comfort and love, now felt foreign and empty. The first thing I noticed was the closet. Half of it was empty. The space where Jake's clothes had always been was now lingly bare in the bathroom. His toiletries were gone, no toothbrush, no shaving kit, none of the small mundane things that had always marked his presence, even the photos of us together. The ones that adorned the walls and shelves had disappeared. It was like he had erased every trace of himself from the life we'd built together. At that moment, I knew he knew. I didn't want to admit it, but the truth was unavoidable. Jake wasn't coming back. The realization hit me like a physical blow, and I stood frozen in the doorway, clutching my purse, as if it could somehow anchor me to the reality I had been so desperate to ignore. The walls felt like they were closing in on me, heavy with his absence. Every room seemed louder in its silence, and the air itself felt suffocating. Sitting down to write, this feels surreal, almost like I'm confessing to a crime. In many ways, I suppose I am. I don't expect sympathy from anyone reading this. I don't deserve it. What I did wasn't just a mistake, it was a betrayal. And I have no excuses. My therapist suggested I write everything down to confront my actions, to stop hiding from the choices that led me here. So here I am pouring everything out, trying to understand how I wrecked my life and ruined the future Jake and I were supposed to share. Jake and I had been together for 3 years, 3 really good years. For the most part, we were supposed to get married in a week. The plans were finalized, the venue, the flowers, the guest list, everything was set. It was all happening so quickly, and somewhere along the way, I lost control of myself. I don't know if it was the pressure of the wedding or my own fear of commitment, but I made the worst decision of my life, a decision I can never take back. Jake wasn't just my partner. He was my grounding force, the calm to my chaos. I still remember the day we met. Like it was yesterday, it was St. Patrick's Day, and we were both at a crowded bar with friends. Amid a sea of green, he stood out. He wasn't wearing anything festive for some reason that caught my attention. He walked up to me with this mischievous grin, holding out a tiny bag of weed, and said, "Here's your pot of gold, leprechaun." I laughed, and from that moment on, we were inseparable. Jake had a way of making everything feel effortless. He was thoughtful, stable, and had this incredible ability to make me feel seen. For the first time in my life, I felt like someone truly understood me, flaws and all, and still loved me unconditionally. But maybe that was the problem deep down. I never felt like I deserved him. Maybe that's why I let my insecurities drive me to sabotage the best thing I'd ever had. As the wedding day approached, the stress began to overwhelm me. The endless planning, the constant decisions, the family drama, it all felt like too much. I wanted everything to be perfect. But in my pursuit of perfection, I lost sight of what really mattered, Jake. Instead of feeling excitement as the big day drew near, I felt trapped. Jake, on the other hand, was his usual calm self. He didn't let the stress get to him and was endlessly patient with me even when I had meltdowns over something as trivial as flower arrangements or seating charts. He only asked for two things: no wild bachelor or bachelorette parties, and that he wanted to wear a traditional suit for the wedding. He wasn't demanding, but even those small requests felt like too much for me. In my spiraling state, I bottled everything up. Instead of talking to Jake, I convinced myself that I needed an escape AP, a way to blow off steam before the wedding. That's when I made the selfish decision to have a bachelorette party despite knowing Jake wouldn't approve. It was reckless and thoughtless, but at the time it felt like the only way to cope with the pressure I was feeling. The party started harmlessly enough. My friends and I went to a bar, had a few drinks, and reminisced about old times. But as the night went on, things escalated. The drinks kept coming shots, too many shots. And before I knew it, we were back at a friend's apartment. That's when the stripper showed up. It was supposed to be a joke, just a silly way to celebrate, but I was already too intoxicated to think clearly. The details of what happened next are blurry. I remember flirting with a stripper, laughing at his jokes, and feeling a rush of excitement I hadn't felt in a long time. It was like I had stepped into a different version of myself, someone reckless and detached from reality. And then somehow I ended up in bed with him the moment I woke up the next morning. The weight of what I'd done came crashing down. I had destroyed everything Jake and I had built together, and I knew there was no way to undo it. Walking into our house and seeing the emptiness confirmed what I already knew Jake had found out, and he was gone. I had no one to blame but myself, the betrayal and the aftermath. It all started with an evening I could barely piece together, an event that felt almost surreal, like I was watching someone else live my life. I was detached, powerless to intervene. As the events unfolded the next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and a sinking feeling that weighed heavy on my chest. For a fleeting moment, I thought Jake, my fiance, was lying next to me in bed. But when I reached out, the horrifying truth became clear. It wasn't him, it was the stripper. My heart sank into a bottomless pit of despair as I stared at the stranger. Panic consumed me. And before I could think, I bolted out of bed, hastily grabbing my clothes and rushing out of his apartment. I moved as though I could outrun the consequences of what had just happened. My mind raced with denial, desperately clinging to the hope that maybe it had been a bad dream. But deep down, I knew the truth. I knew I had crossed an unforgivable line. The guilt began gnawing at me almost immediately. I couldn't fathom how I would face Jake, the man who had loved me unconditionally, when I finally got home. Something felt off. Even before I opened the door, the air inside was different, heavy. Stepping into the apartment, I was struck by the absence of Jake's things. His clothes books, and even the framed photos of us that had adorned the walls, were gone room after room. I searched for some sign of him, clinging to the hope that this was some cruel prank or misunderstanding. But the empty spaces confirmed the bitter reality Jake had left me on the kitchen counter. I found a note with 4 devastating words. Hope it was worth it. The sight of those words blurred as tears streamed down my face. My chest tightened as though I'd been punched, the air knocked out of me. I couldn't believe this was happening. I couldn't believe that my Jake, was truly gone. I thought about apologizing, explaining everything, and begging for forgiveness, but Jake had made his decision clear. I called him repeatedly, only to be sent straight to voicemail. I sent frantic texts, desperate to explain, but none of them went through. He had blocked me on every platform. His phone, social media, even through mutual friends who maintained a cold silence. It was as though Jake had erased me from his life entirely. I collapsed onto the floor, clutching the note as uncontrollable sobs racked my body. The weight of my actions was suffocating. I had ruined the most important relationship in my life, all for a fleeting, meaningless moment of recklessness. This wasn't the first time I'd acted impulsively, chasing short-lived pleasures, but never had I imagined that one decision could cost me everything. The days that followed were a blur of despair. I didn't leave the house, eat, or sleep.
Friends reached out, concerned for my well-being, but I couldn't face them. I was drowning in shame, unable to admit what I had done. How could I explain that I had cheated on Jake, the man who had been planning a life with me, just days before our wedding? The regret was unbearable. My mind played the events of that night over and over, each replay adding to the torment. I wished with every fiber of my being that I could go back and undo it all. But reality was unrelenting, reminding me constantly that the damage was done weeks past. As I tried to navigate the aftermath, the once shared apartment, now half empty, became a daily reminder of what I had destroyed. I couldn't escape the consequences of my actions no matter where I went. Jake was gone, and it was entirely my fault. In a final desperate attempt to find him, I reached out to Jake's best friend Tom. I pleaded with him for information, hoping he might tell me where Jake had gone. Maybe I thought if I could just talk to him, I could salvage something. But Tom's response was as cold and unyielding as Jake's absence asterisk. Jake doesn't want to talk to you. Leave him alone. Asterisk. That was when the reality of my situation hit me with crushing finality. Jake wasn't coming back. He had cut me out of his life completely, and there was no one doing it.